Welcome back, guys. So in the last lecture we understood about how to download and install the SQL developer. So you will get a folder like this. Open the folder, you'll have another folder, open it, and then you see this application, that is SQL developer. This is the main SQL developer application, like we'll be using this one. So when you unzip the SQL developer folder, and once you are at this location, just right click, go to send to, and create a shortcut on your desktop, because it's easy to access the SQL developer from your desktop, right? Now double click this application, that is SQL developer, and this will start 18.2 SQL developer version. So meanwhile our SQL developer loads, let us understand few stuff. So in this lecture I'll be talking about how do you connect to a server using SQL developer. Now understand, guys, when I say server, it can be physical Linux server, it can be your remote Linux server, it can be a Linux server that is hosted on cloud, or anywhere, like any server in the world. Like if I have a database on my system, you can connect to my system database using SQL developer, because all it needs is a network. So if you can connect physically from your system to my system, you can technically connect any database in the world. So first of all, remove this doubt from your mind saying that SQL developer is used to connect to a database that is hosted on a server like a physical box. No, not at all. Because right now I will be connecting to a database, if you see this one, which is hosted on Amazon RDS. So yes, you can use SQL Developer to connect to database which is technically hosted anywhere in the world, right? So before I even start connecting to the database that I have, let us talk about some details that you would need even before connecting to any database. So first of all, you need to have a connection name, like it's a name given by you. So you give this name, like if you're connecting to a prod database. So proddb is the SID. So you can say sys at proddb. So that means that this connection will connect as sys user to proddb. So you can have any connection naming string which makes sense to you. So generally, try to have a good naming convention. I always try to give the username at and the database SID. So that tells me like, okay, this is Scott user at proddb, Scott user at testdb, Scott user at devdb, HR user at devdb. So that way, when I see the connection name, I can say that, okay, this connection is for this database. Now, don't worry, this is only theory part. We will be getting into how to write these names and all those stuff. Next, you would need the username, the database username or the schema name that you want to connect. Like if you have sys user, like Scott user, or maybe HR. So any user that you want to connect to the database, that username you need to have. You definitely need to have the password for the user. So whether it is sys user, Scott user, HR user, you need to have the password as well. Next, we need to have the host name, definitely where the database is hosted, whether it is an IP address, the host name where the database is hosted. Like in my case, right now for this course, I will be connecting to an RDS database that is hosted with Amazon. And then we need to have the port number where your listener is running. Generally the port number that we'll be using, if you can see it over here, it is 1521, the default listener port for the Oracle database. And finally, we need to have the database SID where we are going to connect, or which database we are going to connect on that server, right? So in our case, if you can see, my database SID is testdb. Technically, I mean, we do have these many details, but you actually need these three most important details, including the username and password where you want to connect. Now let us go back to the SQL developer interface. So guys, this is the SQL developer interface when you first start the SQL developer. So first thing that we need to start is we need to build or create a new connection to the database. Okay, so over here you see these connections. In this box you see this plus button, it's nothing but a new connection. That means we want this tool, the SQL Developer graphical tool, to connect to a database. Click on this plus button, and this is where you need all those details that I was talking about, like the connection name, username, password, hostname, port number, and SID. So connection name, I have the database schema that I'm connecting as AKS Golu, and then I'll use at the rate and then test db. That's the database SID. So this is the naming convention I follow because I think it makes more sense to me. When I see a connection name, I can say that okay, this is AKS Golu schema and I'm connected to test db database. Now I need the username, that is AKS Golu, and password. Okay guys, I can't share this password with you because this is my own cloud machine, but in case you would want to practice this Oracle SQL on my cloud, then you can actually go ahead and own a cloud lab. You can see this one, this is my cloud lab, Oracle 12c SQL lab, that is hosted on Amazon RDS. So in case if you want to own a cloud lab, what you can do is you can just go to DBA Genesis, click on Cloud Labs. You can see this Cloud Labs tab, and then if you scroll down, you can see we have a Linux Cloud Lab, and this is where the Oracle SQL Cloud Lab is. I mean, this is the exactly same lab I'm using right now for this course. So in case if you want this lab, it is priced at $14 per month. Let me tell you once again, this is the exactly same lab I'm using right now, because you can see this lab, and let me show you the database SID as well. Can you see this is the username AKS Golu, and yeah, this is the DB name. So technically I'm connecting to the same database in cloud. All right, so now that we have the details, so once you purchase the cloud lab, the SQL cloud lab, you will get your own details, your own username, password, hostname, port, and SID. You'll get all these details. So let me input my password, and now in this hostname area, what we need to do is we'll put my database hostname, and then port number is 1521, that's the default one, and in the SID I need to put the testdb SID, right? So now what you can do is you can click on test. This will test your connection even before you technically add the connection over here. Connection is successful, so what you do is click on save. This will actually add your connection details to this list on the left hand side, and this will add the connection details over here as well, right? And then click on connect, right? So now we have connected to this database, where by looking at this connection we can say okay, this is AKS Golu, that's the user, at the rate testdb, right? Now looks like it is trying to establish the connection, so the SQL developer has stuck. So you can see I'm not able to click. Yeah, now you can see this is your area where you can write the queries and run the queries, which we are going to see in the upcoming lessons. For now, I'm not going to talk about this area. I want to show you guys is, let me try and create another connection, and we'll see how best we can organize the connections on the left hand side. So if I click on the plus button again, the connection name, let us assume I'm connecting as Scott user. So Scott at the rate test db. I think I'll connect to the HR because I know the password for the HR. So I'm connecting to the HR at testdb database. The username should be HR, and then host name, I'll give the same host name. Port number is same, SID is testdb. So now click on test. Oh, you can see the status is success right over here. That means it is perfect, it's working. So what I'll do is I'll click on save. This will save the connection details, you can see it over here, and I'll click on, we can go with cancel. Now if you look at all these connections, this actually makes a great sense, because by looking at the connection name you can say okay, I want to connect to the HR which is on testdb. So just click on this one and you are working on the HR schema on testdb. So it's very easy to organize, and I would definitely recommend the same naming convention you guys can also follow that I personally follow. Makes more sense to me. And this is the way to connect to any database in the world. So ultimately, let me conclude this lecture by saying this: to connect to any database, these are the details you would need. Okay, now it doesn't matter where the database is hosted, whether it is a physical server, cloud, in your system, my system, on a virtual machine, on a VMware, on a Citrix Zen server, wherever it is, whether it is on Windows, Linux, does not matter. If the database listener is running, connect to any database in the world. With this, I want to end this lecture and see you in the next lecture. Bye bye.